as a lot of folks and you guys have discussed, in about 8 years, $1 trillion in interest payments goes to $1.8 trillion, right? Just in interest payments. Social Security and Medicare go insolvent all at about the same time. So you're going to have kind of this perfect storm of financial crises. If Washington does what they typically do and wait to the last minute, that's not a solution. That's just reacting to the crisis. DOGE is very interesting, and this election is very interesting in that it has created a very unique situation where you have an outsider in Elon, an engineer. I'm obviously very partial to engineers, as I am one myself. So he's not beholden to the establishment. He's all about fixing big challenges and fixing and finding efficiencies in big systems. So he's ideal to do it. The key is, like anything, as an engineer, you have to know how the system works before you can really figure out how to tinker with it. Mm-hmm. Well, there's going to be some low-hanging fruit with potential executive orders, but you're going to have to use political capital. And he actually does. He's an outsider of Washington that brings political capital with him. When Elon Musk walks in your office and you're a congressman, believe me, you're going to listen. Not just do whatever he says, but you've got their attention. So if he uses that capital in the right way, and the best part about what they've done, which gives me a lot of optimism, is they've put a time window on it, right? They got 2 years till July of 26 to get this stuff done, get it all moving in the right direction. So, and because there won't be some long-lasting additional piece of government. But as I warned in the piece, a lot of presidents have failed at this attempt. This is a highlight, pivotal moment for Trump, for his administration. They can't blow it. And the last big piece here is Washington has to look to the states, because states, especially Republican states, but really all states, they make tough decisions. They've found efficiencies. One example I give is in Iowa, they went from 37 agencies to 16. Did Kim Reynolds get penalized for that? No, she got championed. The voters thanked her for doing it. So what was traditionally seen as making tough decisions and getting politically penalized in the past, if you don't make those tough decisions now to Congress, you're going to get penalized. And that's what the Speaker has to understand. It's in his political interest to do the hard work that no one's been able to do before.
We can nibble around the edges here for a while, but to your point, long term, a balanced budget amendment should be reconsidered. There are a couple of them that have been proposed. They tend to not get as far as you want them to here. But the question is, can you do that and make it work without getting to, you just talked about it, Social Security and Medicare. That's why this never goes any further.
So again, those things are going to become insolvent in very, very short term. So at some point, they're going to need to address
trust this administration to deal with it?
I trust this administration more than the next one, and I don't even know who the next one is. And that, look, Trump was elected not just on policy; he was elected to be a disruptor, to break that establishment mold as an outsider, and he's brought outsiders with him to do it. And he's got a lot of a very significant political mandate and more experience than he did even in the first term. So the wins are in the sails to get it done. My argument on a balanced budget amendment, it's so critical. By the way, 49 states have balanced budget amendments. We all live in those means. I could tell you, there's no state that's a bigger financial mess than California, right? But even they have a balanced budget amendment. I mean, they end up taxing their citizens and not handling it very well, but they are managed better on a fiscal basis than the federal government. And that should be a warning shot across the Republicans' bow.
I want to return to something you were saying about Elon Musk specifically, that he might be uniquely suited to this role because of his nature of being a political outsider, but still having political capital. He also has just normal capital. His net worth went to $400 billion yesterday. Is there not some conflict of interest here you are worried about, in him specifically, who has companies that contract with the U.S. government having a say in this?
So surprisingly, no, and I'll tell you why. Because he's so rich. I mean, $400 billion, a couple billion more here or there. This isn't a guy that lives extravagantly.
But he still cares about the fate of, say, SpaceX.
Of course he does. But that's not DOGE, right? So you can talk about grant programs and all of this sort of thing, but this place needs a complete structural overhaul. And that's what he's actually really, really good at, taking on giant challenges. People didn't think there was going to be a privatization of going to space. He said, no, we can do it. And he figured it out. So it's not all on him, but he provides the political capital in a way, because he's so wealthy, it's not, he doesn't have a direct financial interest in this per se that is appreciable to him at all. Everybody in D.C. does. Everybody in D.C. wants to keep their job. They're all elected officials. They all have a bigger conflict of interest to do nothing than to actually listen to someone like Elon and the recommendations that come out of this group. You got to find efficiencies everywhere. I think what they're doing with defense is going to be great. Having an audit, I think that's very important. You don't have to lose a single gun, bullet, or soldier just by becoming more efficient creating more competition within what is kind of a cabal right now of contractors and contracts within the Department of Defense. I mean, you can save $100 billion there. I didn't do the details, but there's about 16 executive orders alone that I counted. Over 10 years, $1.5 trillion, just on Biden's executive orders, by the way. So there's a lot of low-hanging fruit there, but structurally, they're going to have to take up something more substantive at some point. Doesn't mean it all happens tomorrow. And getting to a balanced budget amendment agreement basically says this: we're going to go forward in such a way that we eventually get to a balanced budget. We bring things back into the fold the right way. We make that compact with America that says your family has to live by a balanced budget and so don't we. That in itself will reinstore so much trust that Washington doesn't have. They have it with governors and state legislators and mayors, but they don't have it with Washington. So it's in their political interest to do the hard work. Now, I think it's going to take time, of course, but when I hear, I get a little concerned. I hear Republicans say, well, we're going to cut that program and that program. Well, that sounds fine. You want to cut them? Cut them. I don't care. But that's nipping on the edges. That's political speak. You need real structural, financial structural reform here. And now's the time to do it.
Well, in the meantime, this administration wants to advance the Trump tax cuts, make them permanent, likely add to the deficit in the process. Where do you draw the line? How much is palatable until the cuts start to kick in?
So I think the cuts they have now and continuing them is very, very important because you need a growth model here too. And what, as you guys I think have talked about, there's so much cash being held by so many of these large corporations, right? What is $450 billion just being held by Berkshire Hathaway or whatever it is, right? And then you multiply that with all these other large, because these companies were holding on to it because all the inflationary risk that comes with regulation of the change or not change, if Kamala were to win, of administrations, right? There was so much regulatory inflation there. They were holding their cash because they didn't know where things were going to go. Hopefully with the tax cuts in this administration, private equity starts moving a little more, deal flow starts moving a little more, cash starts being released, and really promotes that growth. So while we're making some tough cuts, while we're making the tough decisions, block granting things back to the states. I mean, think about it. Department of Education is the one they talk about all the time. You can get rid of 90% of that bureaucracy, save tons of money, and still block grant the same money back to states and allow states have the efficiency of reinvesting those funds how they see fit. What's good for Massachusetts is different than Minnesota or Nebraska or New Hampshire. So let them decide. I can tell you as a governor, when we look at all these programs and all this money that comes from D.C., there are so many strings attached. We have to say no to some of this money sometimes because it's so not in New Hampshire's interest to take the money because of all the additional attachments to it. You block grant things back, believe in the states. As you've probably heard me say before, them founding fathers, they were wicked smart, as we say in New Hampshire. They really were. Federalism works. States have already done a lot of what DOGE is looking to achieve, on a smaller level, to be sure. But a lot of it is just copy and paste. We've done the hard work. It's not some newfound crazy idea. It's actually Washington is the last one at the table to try to figure this out.
Well, you obviously are still speaking with us as an incumbent governor, but your term is almost up.
Tick-tock, 29 days is the clock.
The clock is ticking. So, of course, we're wondering what the future holds for you. And I do wonder, given that it does seem the American people delivered this mandate of more efficiency in government, more disruptions, not just with the election of Donald Trump, but with a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate. With that kind of Republican leadership mandate, does that make you rethink how much you want to be involved in politics in the next 4 years or
no, not in the next
2028?
4 years. No, look, it may be long term. I would come back into things.
How long is long term?
I'm nothing I'm thinking about, I can tell you. I do want to stay involved, and that's why I'm going to keep writing op-eds and maybe do some media and all that sort of thing. I left a resume at the front desk for y'all, but you know, I'm economically driven. I'm a business guy. I'm an engineer. That's why I'm so passionate on the DOGE thing. And again, I go back to governors, not just myself, but governors all across the spectrum have really done a lot of this hard work. I think that needs to be championed. We talk too much on the national level of just what happens in this bubble in D.C. But frankly, the bubble of D.C., both media and otherwise, never talks to the real people out in the rest of the country. That's why when around mid-September, it was clear to a lot of us that Trump was going to win handily. And it was like, well, how can you say that? How can you say that? The people that were questioning that were in New York and Washington. The rest of America was going, just talk to your neighbors. You could see it coming. You could see where this was all going.